What is up, Nico Nation, and all the followers of the Draft Guys podcast with Peyton and Nico on your platform providers for podcasts? While this won't be a draft episode, we're going back to the regular season, really preseason, if you will, with our Snap Count series, our NFL news series, where we highlight all the surrounding news surrounding NFL events. And today we have 2026 training camp. I am your host, Niko Chambers, Nico the Draft Guy. You can call me, alongside my co-host, Pete Dunn. Pete Dunn, how's it going?
I'm good, man. We made it. It's been a long summer. We had a great draft season. Really good time over there with the Draft Guys podcast. But I'm excited to get back to some real football. Obviously, we're in training camp. We're in the preseason. Really excited to cover some of these teams, cover some of these players, and get into this with you.
We are going to go all out for you today, giving you a little sneak peek. Of course, this is one of our favorite shows that we do. And we're just going to really talk about the NFL first, starting off with the camp market. So you see on the screen here, Pete Dunn, we have all 32 teams of the NFL. We got the risers, we got the fallers, we got them all on the screen. Pete Dunn, I'm going to give you the floor to talk about anyone you would like.
Yeah, the first team that catches my eye is the Chiefs. Obviously we put them pretty high up there on the stock market, and I think they're going to have a really good season this year. We talked about last year, kind of really a down year from their expectations. Obviously, a lot of that happened with the Mahomes injury, but they weren't playing particularly well before that. And a lot of people forget about that. This is a team that has a lot to prove this year. This is a younger roster. They've tooled a lot of new pieces around Mahomes. The offensive line is looking really good. The receiver room, they're starting to tool together. Maybe the best receiver room they've had since Tyreek Hill's absence. And then the defense is going to be good. Trent McDuffie's absence is a lot to fill, but I think they're doing a good job in that secondary. I definitely think the stock is up for the Kansas City Chiefs.
I see a team like Washington climbing up the ranks. Obviously, you have the Cowboys, a lot of buzz around them lately. I think the Patriots are really in that high part. Might be trending down, though. I don't like their strength of schedule. I think that it's a harder one this year. I don't like their win total. I think they might go under it. We obviously got the two perennial teams here, the Seahawks and the Rams. The Rams are about as high as you could ever get in terms of an NFL organization, obviously awaiting the Aaron Donald news, but we'll talk about that very soon. Obviously, I got to talk about your Bears, Pete, on, a little bit of a downtick. Can you tell us why you think that we rank them here?
I don't know. I think that there's an expectation, specifically around the defense, that there wasn't a lot of moves made. And I think there's a lot of people that are questioning whether the absence of, a major progression in the defense can uphold what the offense did last year. You lose DJ Moore. Romo Dunze still has not taken that step as that wide receiver one. Luther Burden injured in camp. So there's a lot of question marks. In a perfect world, I think a lot of those can be solved. And especially the defensive side, I think they can take that next step. But again, I'm not too concerned. I think this team will be really good this year and will be better than they were last year.
There's some other teams, though, that are really not looking too good. We'll talk about them really quickly. The Carolina Panthers, man. I mean, a brutal training camp so far. Obviously, major injuries to Brazel and, of course, Scorton. We'll talk about Scorton in a second. But, man, you're trying to build off of a year where you won the NFC South, and that's just not the news that you need. Another team that I'm not high on at all, and I've heard some crazy reports about, is going to be the Eagles, man. I mean, I heard that Mekhi Lemon may not even be the wide receiver two for this team, and it may be Dontavian Wicks, which that is crazy to me. I don't even want to get into them and how I feel about Mekhi Lemon. If you want to see how Nico feels about Mekhi Lemon, you should go check out the rest of our platform because we got plenty of videos on him. But for now, we will be talking about the injury bug, which, oh man, it has hit the NFL hard. We got Ricky Pearsall, Jalen Walker, Nick Scorton, Brian Bresee, so many other players are dealing with major injuries that have already knocked them out for the season. Pete, as you're obviously an analyst here, you're trying to figure out, okay, these NFL teams, how are their depth charts going to look? How do you, I guess, respond to all of these injuries and a ton of them this year?
Yeah, it's just hard because these aren't depth players. These are star players. We're expected to play really major roles on these teams. This is San Francisco's wide receiver one that they expected to have this season, right? Jalen Walker, coming off his rookie year that was fantastic, expected to take a big step and be the heart of that defense for the Falcons. And then Nick Scorton, a guy that you and me were super, super high on through the draft process when he came out. Another guy expected to be the dude this year for the Panthers and is not going to be able to because of these major injuries. So it's hard for these organizations. You don't really have a way to fill a hole like that. You can't just go, okay, next man up when they're some of the best players on your team. There is no philosophy like that. So it's strength in numbers behind them. Somebody's going to have to step up, and probably multiple guys are going to have to step up and fill those voids.
I mean, it's an absolute disaster. We don't have it on the screen here, but what's going on at the 49ers in the injuries? I mean, Stribling's not practicing. Mike Evans is not practicing. Obviously, Ricky Pearsall's out for the year. What do you do there? And of course, they just signed Debo Samuel. That's going to be ultimately the wide receiver one for your team, and he's washed. So you got to figure out really how to deal with everything that's going on. We got some other notable guys, Tunsil has a tricep injury. He had multiple over the course of this training camp, and it isn't even over yet. We had Kobe Bryant, obviously, 4 to 6 months there with that hyperextended knee. Not the news you want to hear for an impending free agent after you bring him in. Alec Pierce. Let's talk about Alec Pierce real quick because he gets ankle surgery after getting the bag that he got this offseason. And he has not seen the sidelines. How do you decipher that for the Colts fans, for the people of fantasy football, maybe? Like, what do we do with Alec Pierce?
Yeah, I was never that high on the extension that they gave him. I didn't think he was worth the money, and it's going to be tough to see a guy that is known for his speed, known for his deep threat ability to come off an ankle surgery. So I don't know. Obviously, this year is going to be tough to see when he comes back, what that timeline is. But even for the future, is he ever going to be back to what he was before? That sounds silly to say about an ankle surgery, but it's a real thing that you could 2 years from now, you might be like, yeah, he just never recovered from that. So not to speak that over him, I hope he comes back okay, but that's a real thing Colts fans have to worry about.
Extremely concerning with Kenyon Sadiq. Your first round pick cannot get on the field for a hernia injury. It's going to be super interesting to see and really decipher with fantasy football, obviously, with some of these receivers, tight end, obviously, maybe some of the running backs. We'll move on here, though, to our camp crushers, and Pete Dunn will go first here.
Yeah, Denzel Boston looks like not only is he going to be the wide receiver one for the Browns, he's going to be a really, really good rookie receiver. If you're in fantasy football, draft this guy. He's going to get all the targets, no matter who the quarterback is. A guy that I was really high on through some points last year in the draft process. There's obviously flashes of talent there. If you can get him in a scheme that knows how to use them, I think they will. I think the sky is the limit for Denzel Boston this year.
100%. I'll talk about Jacoby Lane. Obviously, my brother texted me all about Jacoby Lane. He's a Ravens fan, but we're talking about really a guy, a third round pick at a USC, really, who has taken, I guess, their team by storm. And obviously, they haven't really had any help in the wide receiver room. We think Zay Flowers is a clear wide receiver, too, in this league. We are not high on him. And then we got to even talk about the contract that he just got with all of the guaranteed money. Absolutely not on our books. But at the end of the day, Jacoby Lane is a really good opportunity to be really a wide receiver 1, 2, obviously more of a boundary guy than the Zay Flowers, who's really a slot player. He can make really big head waves, and he has made really big head waves. You may have to watch out for him in fantasy. You may have to watch out for him in terms of the touch battle for that wide receiver.
Yeah, absolutely. David Bailey is a guy that I was massively low on. I was very well known to have him outside of my top 40 for my final big boards, and he's had a really good camp. I'm not willing to say that I was wrong on him just yet. I'm interested to see how they use him, what his numbers look like this year and over the next few years. But all the reports coming out of Jets camp is that he's having a great camp. He's flying off the charts. Everybody's really impressed with how he's doing. So I'm not going to say I'm wrong yet, but he has had a really good camp.
I mean, that's what you want to hear ultimately when you draft him with the number 2 overall pick. We'll talk about a guy going to a team that had a million picks that drafted a million positions and a lot from this one position. That is Caleb Douglas, wide receiver for the Dolphins. He's on this list because not because I really love him, not because I think he's going to be a great NFL football player, because they named him as the wide receiver one on their depth chart. And I mean, with all the guys that they have there, they have Tolbert. Obviously, they have Malik Washington. They have, Chris Bell, a guy that I really thought would take that role. You're looking at Caleb Douglas, and he may be that guy. And I just think it's crazy to say that we are sitting here, a few weeks away from the season, and Caleb Douglas is going to be a wide receiver one for an NFL football team.
Yeah, I think someone has to catch footballs for this team, right? And so I guess someone has to be the wide receiver one. It's really fascinating that he took over that role. I want to talk about Jadarian Price. I love Jadarian Price. You love Jadarian Price. He's at your Seahawks. We were super high on him through this draft process. Thought he was an elite level running back, not too far off from where Jeremiah Love was, and way better than any other running back in this class behind him. And he has shown all of that and more in training camp so far with the Seahawks. Everything we're hearing, and you know this more than I do from the Seahawks side of things, is that he is going to be an absolute beast. He's going to take over that RB1 role. Whether Charbonnet is going to be healthy or not down the line, he's going to be awesome. They spent a first round pick on it, and I think they're going to get their dividends back.
People are really worried about the George Halani type of thing, where he's going to come in and they're going to try to play a similar role while Charbonnet is out. that they did with Kenneth Walker with Jadarian Price. So I'm not worried about that at all. They may split it, but it's ultimately better for Jadarian Price. But at the same time, Jadarian Price is a guy who, like we say all the time, has a lot of tread on the tires. He can do a lot of different things, and he hasn't really been running to the ground because he was playing behind Jeremiah Love in college. I'll talk about really quickly Cy Allen, a guy that I really liked coming out, one of my sleepers. In the first episode we did of the Draft Guys podcast, when we were talking about really this Reese's Senior Bowl and everything, he was one of those guys that I mentioned. And now we're looking at him now, and he's making noise in a wide open, I say wide open, it's really a jumbled up Kansas
Yeah.
City wide receiver room. You got different players all across the board. Mainly some of them, most of them really, are really specializing in speed. Cy Allen is one of those speed guys, 5'11, 180, but he's making headways, and he ultimately was having such a good training camp that we were thinking, oh my goodness, he may be working up wide receiver 3 territory behind Worthy. And of course, Rashee Rice. And then he had that injury, but I think he's going to be okay from that injury. He's going to make it out. He's having an unbelievable year. What a great job by Kansas City to get him in the late rounds. I mean, it's just an unbelievable job. We'll move on, though, here to the position battles. This is probably the biggest segment on the show today. So, of course, we have the position battles. You have the Vikings. We're going to talk about them first, naming Kyler Murray the quarterback one over J.J. McCarthy. Pete Dunn, how are you feeling about that? Is that the right move for this Vikings team?
So I had JJ McCarthy as a top 15 prospect in his draft class. I was very high on him coming out, and I really like the idea of him. I know he was injured that first year, but sitting behind Sam Darnold due to injury, taking some time in that offense, I thought it was going to work. I actually think it still can work. I know I'm in the very, very, very small minority here. He looked a lot better towards the back half of the season. There was real progression made there. I think Kyler Murray just fits this scheme better. I think he offers something that he hasn't seen before. And so I think they're going to go with Kyler, go with the veteran. But again, Kyler's not around for forever. It would not shock me if Kyler plays pretty well this season, gets it back somewhere else, and they turn back to JJ next year.
Yeah, it would be super shocking to me. I love the Kyler Murray move here. Them going to get him was very underrated. I think that he can do a bunch of good things. And this Vikings team, you got to remember, they won 9 games last year with 4 quarterbacks and poor play. Some of the worst play in the league when you have Carson Wentz, JJ McCarthy, Max Brosmer. You remember that game versus Seattle? That was pretty bad. But at the end of the day, I think they're the dark horse in the NFC. I really do. That division is already loaded. Everyone's overlooking them. You have the Bears, you have the Packers. Of course, you have the Lions, who are getting a lot more buzz lately, which I don't really agree with. But at the end of the day, the Vikings, man, they may be that sleeper team, and you never know what happens when, the Packers become fourth in that division. We'll really move on here to the Browns and the Falcons, who some of the more intriguing, I guess, quarterback battles we've had in recent memory. We're going to start with the Browns. We're always talking about the Browns every single year. They were on this list literally last year. You can go back and check out that video. But here it is. It's Shadur Sanders and Deshaun Watson. Pete, what are you hearing from Browns camp? Who's going to be the guy?
It seems like Watson's going to be the guy. I would be very surprised if Shadur Sanders trots out as quarterback one during the first game of the season. I think it's going to be Watson. I think they're going to lean to him. You've just got more to tap into there. I think there's more proven production. I know it hasn't been good lately. The Achilles really set him back. Obviously, all the off the field stuff. If he can overcome that, and I think there's rumors coming out of camp that he has played pretty well, I don't think Shooter has taken a big enough step to overcome that, if that makes sense. I think Shooter has kind of been the same guy as he was last year, and he didn't play good enough to a point where you're not going to turn to the veteran in Watson.
Yeah, I mean, they're giving him too much money. Obviously, at the end of the day, we know that. But I would be shocked if it's not Watson. I'm going to be completely honest. I've heard reports that Shadur could be cut. I've heard reports that Shadur could be the starter. I'm not sure what to believe. I think we just have to see really in these preseason games. Hopefully, they both get action in these preseason games coming up really later this weekend and then in the coming weeks, of course. And then we have another quarterback battle that has two lefties, a unique one. We got Tua, we got Michael Penix, both coming really back from an injury, or Tua's got a back injury. Of course, Michael Penix the knee. We're trying to figure out who wins this one. P. Dunn, I'm going to ask you, who do you think should be the starter, not who do you think is going to be?
I think Tua should be the starter. There is proven production of him being a really good quarterback in the league. I know it didn't last long, and I know he was in kind of the height of that Tyreek Hill Waddle offense, but I think this is a guy that you look at the weapons around him. You look at Bijan, obviously Drake London, obviously Kyle Pitts. Like, I think there's room here. Branch is in that offense now. I think there's room here where you can get him as a game manager. Penix is much more of that gunslinger type, and he's going to go 90 miles an hour and try and create. You don't need a quarterback to create when you have arguably some of the best weapons in the NFL on your offense. You need a guy that can manage the game and get the ball to Bijan out of the backfield, get the ball to Pitts, obviously get the ball to London and Branch. You've got really good weapons, and let the guy that is the game manager take over that offense is what I think.
A lot higher on Tua Tagovailoa than I am. I think he sucks. I'm not gonna lie. I think he is not that great of a quarterback in the NFL, and I think that Michael Penix is the only upside pick here. Maybe he can revive his career here in Atlanta, but we saw what it looked like the last few years. He has to stay healthy.
Yeah,
He clearly can't.
yeah.
It's really unfortunate of a situation. We'll move here though to an intriguing one. This is one of my favorite ones, the Browns wide receiver room. Pete, can you give us an insight on what it's looking like at camp in terms of, I guess, the scheme alignments for Denzel Boston, Casey Concepcion, Jerry Jeudy, and company?
Yeah, obviously, we talked about Denzel Boston earlier. Looks like he's having an incredible camp and is going to be the main target of that offense when week one comes for whoever the quarterback's going to be. Behind him, I think there's a battle between Concepcion and Judy. Obviously, Concepcion has been, in and off the field, kind of struggling with some injuries. Judy is Judy. He's been very streamlined, very steady. I think they're going to look to move one of them inside and one of them outside. The problem with that is they're both very similar skill sets. I love the route running ability of both of them. They both have really good deep threat ability. I think Concepcion's a better deep threat. I had him as a top 10 player on last year's class. I was very clear about that. So I think Concepcion should get the start. Again, though, he's so young. They're all three going to play. They're all three going to get a lot of reps. I don't know where the target share is going to go, other than I feel pretty confident Denzel Boston's going to lead this group.
I 100% agree. You got a true X receiver, you got a true slot guy, and then Jerry Jeudy, pretty good wide receiver too, if you will. Super excited for him to kind of be there. He'll really be the wide receiver 3, though, or 4 in terms of targets. You still have Harold Fannin on this roster
Yeah,
and Quinshon Judkins. It's a really young
yeah,
Browns team.
it
If they can
is.
figure it out at quarterback, man, they're going to be good because that defense
Yeah,
is elite. We're looking at the Cardinals next year. I'll go into them a little bit. Obviously, you have the pick, the third overall pick, Jeremiah Love, Tyler Algier. You have James Conner, you have Trey Benson. I think the way it's going to line up, and you'll see this in a few episodes that we're going to do here shortly when we talk about RB handcuffs for the fantasy version. I think that Love is probably the 50% back, and I think Algier is probably the 35. However, I do think that this is a hot hand system. I think of like Carolina, if you will, from last year, where obviously you have Rico Dowdle. You also have Chuba Hubbard, but you're rolling with ultimately the hot hand. I think that could be a way that James Conner gets into the line. But I do think Jeremiah Love is going to headline this backfield at about that split. Obviously, Algier, you think about what he did last year with that Falcons team in terms of taking those touches at the goal line. I project that he will do something similar this year. But Jeremiah Love, man, he's going to be that workhorse. He's the best receiving back in this room. He's the best pure rusher in this room. You got different roles for guys. That's what we like so much, really, about preseason football. Hopefully, we can see Jeremiah Love here shortly. I'll go really quickly into Denver. You have Harvey, you have Dobbins. I didn't include him here, but you have Jonah Coleman as well. I do think Dobbins will start the year if he isn't injured. Obviously, we just had an injury that happened to him. If he starts the year healthy, I think he will be the lead back by like a 5% margin, and then you'll give it to Harvey. I think by the end of the year, Harvey will take over that backfield. So will Jonah Coleman. But I think J.K. Dobbins, they know how to split it up for him. I'm super excited to see kind of how they move Jonah Coleman in here because Jonah Coleman really could be that change of pace back with Harvey, who has all the receiving upside, and then you have Dobbins in the pure downfield rushing area. We have Jacksonville, Pete Dunn. You got Brian Thomas Jr., you got Parker Washington, you have Jacoby Myers and Travis Hunter. How are we splitting up that wide receiver room?
yeah, I want nothing to do with this wide receiver room, man. Jacoby Myers obviously had a really good back half of the season last year, with the downside of BTJ, what he wasn't able to do. Parker Washington was pretty steady throughout the whole year, but again, Parker Washington should probably be your wide receiver 3 or 4. And then Travis Hunter, just put him at corner. Like, I don't understand why we're still doing this. We had a failed year. He got hurt. That's going to happen a lot if you continue to try and do what they're doing with him. I don't want anything to do with him playing receiver unless they put him full-time at receiver, and that's a different thing. But the only thing I would say here is, again, we talked about Deshaun Watson. We talked about Tua. I am a guy betting on upside for players that have proven it before. Brian Thomas Jr. did not just forget how to play receiver. And I think a lot of people are thinking that he had a really, really good rookie receiver season and just didn't get into the groove last year. He's a trade candidate at the deadline. I think, again, he will be again this year. But Brian Thomas will be good this year. I've drafted him in fantasy in both of my leagues. I would recommend y'all to do the same. I think this is an upside player here. I think he's going to be really good this year.
I 100% agree. I mean, people forget the 1,200-yard season that he had. I mean, it might have been even more than that, and just what he did, it was him and Neighbors, and they were the best receivers really coming out of that class, and I don't think that went anywhere. I think that when you have Shane Waldron, as Pete Dunn knows well, as Nico knows well, as your OC, it's just not gonna work, and you see what happens to these guys when Shane Waldron leaves the building, and I will point to JSN because the minute that he left, JSN took off. And obviously, he didn't have as much competition around him, I guess, because DK and obviously Tyler Lockett were kind of aging out and they ended up going to different places. But I still do believe in Brian Thomas Jr. I think he's a phenomenal football player. We'll move on here to Hey Rookie College Fantasy Edition. So this is a special segment. Obviously, we got to tie it back in to the Draft Guys podcast. But ultimately, if you haven't heard, Yahoo is bringing in college fantasy football, and we're going to cover it right here, right now, with Pete Dunn spearheading his top 10 players for that brand new format on Yahoo.
Yeah, this is pretty fun being able to talk about this. These are all players that I've done pretty early scouting reports on. And obviously, the number one and number two are very self explanatory. Jeremiah Smith, Cam Coleman, you've heard about them all year. You're going to hear about them all year until the draft comes up. These two are going to be some of the best receivers in the National Football League for a long time. The one that some draft fans might not know a lot about yet is Malachi Tony. He is someone that is Miami. He was a true freshman last year, and he will not be draft eligible because he still has 2 more years of eligibility left. But he's a dog. He's really fun, really, really cool player. Reminds me a little bit of Debo when Debo was in his prime. And so keep an eye on him coming out in the next few years. Got a really good running back class this year and next year. Jaden Ball, kid out of Florida, super high upside. Need him to prove it a little bit more, but I think he's going to get a lot of touches in that Florida backfield. Kewan Lacey, going to be really good in this year's draft class. Nick Marsh out of Indiana, Charlie Becker out of Indiana, really good receiver room for them. And then the guy I would really circle is Hollywood Smothers from Texas. He's a good receiving back. Obviously, Texas offense is going to be insane with Arch Manning this year, so expect him to get touches out of the backfield as well as being really good in the running game.
Of course, I'll ask you, Pete Dunn, as we go into the college football season. Let's talk about quarterbacks really quickly. None on the list right here, but I want to know, what is your top three if the NFL draft, the 2027 draft, this loaded draft class was tomorrow? What is your top three? What are you hearing from camp? What would you do as an NFL franchise organization? Who are the best players?
That's a great question. So top three quarterbacks. I think I would still have, and a lot of people are going to like this, I would have Arch Manning at one. I think the upside with him, he played really, really good football in the back half of the year last year. So if you watch the tape from the first half, maybe that Ohio State game, you're probably not going to like him that much. But if you watch what he did when he settled in, I think he was fantastic. He would be my quarterback one. CJ Carr, the kid out of Notre Dame, would be my number two. I love the way he handles the pocket. Doesn't necessarily have a rocket of an arm, but unbelievably accurate. Some of the best touch I've seen from a quarterback in a long time. And between the ears, he's absolutely fantastic. He has a really hard system there at Notre Dame. And so it's going to be his year without the running backs that they obviously had last year. And then I'd probably have Mensa at three. He was at Duke last year and I think he had a 4 interception game, but other than that, he only threw 3 picks the entire season. If you take out that one game, his interception to pick ratio was like 11-1, which is fantastic. He was really, really good last year. Going to Miami, I think they're going to utilize him really well with obviously Malachi Tony, how we talked about. I think they're going to build on that. I think he's going to be arguably the best versions of Cam Ward and the best versions of Carson Beck combined into one. And so I expect there's probably 5 other quarterbacks I could talk about that are going to come out this year. We've talked about it before. This draft class is unlike anything I've ever seen before. It is the best I've ever scouted already, and these kids still have another year to develop. I will be the first one to screaming from the mountaintops. This draft class is going to be incredible.
I mean, you got Dante Moore, who's not on that list. You got Sellers, who's not on that list. Of course, you got Mestamaker. You got so many great prospects, really good guys. And we really, honestly, don't have that many openings in the NFL for 6 quarterbacks to come in immediately. So super intrigued to see ultimately what quarterbacks fall off. And that'll take us really to the preseason outlook. So obviously, getting our eyes set on preseason football, which started with the Hall of Fame game. You just talked about Carson Beck. Man, did he look good. But we got some other quarterbacks that we want to see. We got some other players that we want to see. I'll ask you, Pete, and we'll go back and forth here. What are you looking for most in terms of what you're looking to watch this preseason?
He's going to get benched for Carson Beck. There's real upside there with Carson Beck. Brissett is not going to win them any football games other than maybe the number one overall pick. So I think they're going to look to maybe go to Beck, see what they got. You might as well with a quarterback like that. And I think watching that over the next few weeks is going to be really fun.
I think I'm most excited for the running back committees. Obviously, as an analyst, obviously, we're about to get into really fantasy football, as we were saying, and trying to decipher, I guess, what it's going to look like has been a lot of fun. I really circle, obviously, the Cardinals. I circle the Broncos. I circle the Saints. They have a bunch of things going on
Yeah.
with ETN. You have Kamara. You have Devin Neal and obviously Kendre Miller. I mean, you have the Jaguars, which obviously they have Tootin as the lead guy, but is he going to do everything? You got Chris Rodriguez in there. You got LaQuint Allen. Like, you got a lot of these guys and a lot of these teams that really you have to decipher this running back committee. And I'll even argue the Seahawks, if you will, because they like to run a committee and they don't got many guys for this committee besides Jadarian Price. So I'm super interested to see kind of their usage in terms of if the coaches play them in preseason, what do they look like in preseason? And if preseason football, the games will be the determinant of who wins each committee.
Yeah, I love that. I am stoked to watch Mendoza. I hope we get to see some real reps. I think talking about a quarterback competition, I think it's pretty cut and dry. Kirk Cousins is going to start the year, which is exactly what I think they should do. I think Kirk Cousins should start, have the first few weeks, maybe up to half of the season, and then you give the ball to Mendoza, let him settle into this scheme. And I think the first time we're going to watch him in this scheme is going to be preseason. I'm so excited. Kubiak has a very, very, very complicated scheme. Mendoza, the biggest thing I struggled with him with is his ability to read the field and go from concept to concept. Going to be really interesting to see if he can handle that in the preseason.
I 100% agree. I'm going to move to the Seahawks Hard Knocks. Watching them on Hard Knocks has been really, really cool to see kind of how the Super Bowl champions go about their business. I'm super excited to see kind of how they game plan here in these preseason games as Hard Knocks moves on into the preseason. I just love it. I love watching this team. I love this coach. I love Mike McDonald. I love the spotlight he is getting, and I think it's super cool to see them a year after they win the Super Bowl when this series is usually on teams that are not very good. You usually get the Jets or the Giants, like in previous years, or teams like the Bears who were not great. They had a big revival, but this was before the revival. This is in the middle of the revival, and the Seahawks are going to be good for a very long time. I'm super excited to see what they continue to build on.
Yeah, I should have put Milrow on this list, watching Milrow in the preseason, but I didn't. So you mentioned the Seahawks. I want to give a shout out. Watching Milrow hopefully will be really fun over these next few weeks. And then getting it back into the quarterback competition, Shedeur versus Deshaun, I think they're both going to get reps. I think they're both going to get time for the Browns quarterback room. Watching them go head to head, getting them splitting offensive drives, I think is going to be really fascinating. I don't know how much we're going to figure out about who's going to be the starter, but just watching them is going to be really.
Yeah, man. I mean, you talked about Milrow. We love Milrow. We will definitely see him in the preseason. Hopefully, I heard they were saying that he was like a trade candidate or something. I want nothing to do with that. I want him on my team forever. I don't care if Sam Darnold wins another Super Bowl. I just need him on the team. So sit him for 7 years. I don't really care. We'll move though to a team, the 49ers, very low on. We don't think they're going to have a year. I think that their Super Bowl window is obviously over, and they're trying to fill it with aging receivers and then really bad picks like this Stribling pick. We talked about that. Check out the whole channel if you want to see how Nico feels about that. But I'm just so interested to see what the room is going to look like September 1st. Is Mike Evans' injury serious? Is Deshaun Stribling's injury serious enough to sideline him past week one? Obviously, you're not going to have Pearsall, and then you have Debo now, and it's just you don't have Jawan Jennings, that safety blanket. So, I mean, like, what do you do? I'm really interested to see the depth chart, I guess, when we get basically a week out from the season.
Yeah, and then I want to talk about the Eagles. We mentioned them pretty briefly earlier, but this is a new look offense. Mekhi Lemon is now your wide receiver 2 with the A.J. Brown trade. We've got an aging Saquon Barkley. Lane Johnson is announced this is going to be his last year of football. You've obviously got a new offensive coordinator there, just like you do every year. Jalen Hurts has not been known for his passing ability, and now you take even less of that passing ability away. Devontae Smith, it's been a while since he's been a wide receiver 1, so very new look and not really in a good way. Is it a new look offense? So I'm interested to see how they manage that, whether they can make it work, whether Saquon can continue what he's been able to do these last few years. And yeah, I'm really interested to see.
Yeah, Dallas Goedert by far the biggest sleeper for fantasy and really just that team in general after they give him another contract. He's going to be a huge wide receiver weapon, especially if Mekhi Lemon does not see the field in the first few weeks of the season. I'll move to the last real big talking point here. And I'll ask Pete on this one. Does Aaron Donald return in 2026? I'm so focused on that as a Seahawks fan. I'm so focused on that as an analyst. That would be an unbelievable story. That would honestly be the biggest story of training camp. We haven't had that many big stories this training camp
Yeah.
like previous years. That would be a massive story. Pete, what are you hearing? What are you thinking? Are you going to break the bad news to me?
No, I absolutely think he's coming back. There's no way with all this buzz that he's just like, you know what? I'm actually good. He's for sure coming back. Miles Garrett edition, obviously this team being primed for a Super Bowl run. He's ready. I think he'll be really good. People forget that he didn't retire because of old age. He retired because he was kind of done with football and he checked his box, got his Super Bowl, and he wants another one, and it would be tough to see them not winning another one if he comes back.
I think if they come back, I'll give the favorites for the Super Bowl to them. I disagree with the fact that we are not that now, but if you get Aaron Donald back in the mix, man, and we got to deal with that. That's going to be an issue. But at the end of the day, they're doing all this just to beat Sam Darnold. You got to remember that. We thank you guys so much for tuning in here with us today to Snap Count. It's been an absolute pleasure. As you can see, we got new equipment. We got many things coming to you live. We got merch coming. We got fantasy analysis and everything in between. I'm so blessed to be here. On behalf of me and Pete Dunn, we say so long from the Draft Guys podcast and Nico the Draft Guy.